Hey New Trier, I'm Sofia Fernandez, and I make videos for the multimedia section of the New Trier News. Today I wanted to spotlight a class at this high school that maybe you haven't heard of before, Miss O'Reilly's Comic Art and Animation. To be honest, I didn't exactly know what to expect walking into this class, having skipped my 7th period to come film. As I walked in and set up my camera, students were already opening their sketchbooks and sharpening their pencils. Instead of regular graphite, they sketched in colored, no-photo blue pencils. I don't know why they called them that, as they were very easy to photograph. I came in on an anchor day, meaning that I didn't get quite the same amount of content that the class usually has. As a warm-up, the students first did quick sketches in their notebooks based on a prompt, Halloween-themed, as this was recorded the day prior. The warm-ups were clearly intentional, helping the students engage in different artistic skills. They made up characters, scenes, and stories, all off the top of their heads, and all very quickly. I was impressed with the speed and detail of the artists in such a short time. Later on in the class, students began working on a project involving a very large piece of paper. They were to take their warm-ups and began drawing them out in their entirety on this paper, making the characters and scenes cohesive and immersive, all in a comic book style. Needless to say, I was impressed with this class. From the direction and helpfulness of the teacher to the rapt attention of the students, I can say with confidence that it should be considered by more students across New Trier. But, let's keep in mind, I only visited for one day. I still wanted to get the whole picture, the inside scoop of the class, and what kinds of students take it. So, the following day, I interviewed 2 artists to hear their opinions on the class and their experiences with art in general.
Well, I find kind of stories pretty interesting to tell, and that's something that I think fairly consistent throughout my work, but I'm specifically kind of working on, I'm trying to create a story of a like kind of fantasy story, and I'm kind of bad at communicating it. It's not going so well, and I'm really trying to, like, I guess, expand my skills of, like, storytelling, composition, all that jazz,
Yeah.
Well, I don't really have a personalized style, and I thought that maybe going into comic art could really give me that personalized style, because I'm not, realism and all that didn't really just sit with me. So, it was mostly for the comic art, not as much for the animation.
I think for comics, if you look in my notes app, I have a bunch of, like, either discarded ideas or, like, snippets of ideas, like, oh, this happens, and there's, like, a 70% chance they'll be left there to rot, basically. But every now and again, I actually do try and make a comic out of it. I guess for paintings, it's kind of like if it's a super detailed painting of something where I want to lay it out, I do normally sketch it out digitally, because digitally you can erase stuff, you can move stuff around, it's really easy to manipulate, so just mess around with that, get the basic shape, and then start drawing on the canvas.
Yeah.
And I have a kind of funny process of, like, where it looks like I've done a lot of work really fast, because I like kind of carving out shapes, because I use acrylic, so layering's pretty pivotal to my work, I guess.
Yeah.
It all kind of starts with the style, or like an idea, like, oh, I want to try this, and it's usually trying something new, and that usually doesn't turn out so well, but that's good. And then sometimes I draw things that I've drawn before and just make it better. My personal, how I make art is sketch it, or have the idea, sketch it, transfer it over to a different piece of paper so I can, like, sketch it cleanly and then color it in. But I mostly do paintings. I do a lot of paintings on the back of glass, so you can't really make mistakes there. You have to sketch it out first. I'm not good with drawing with just pen. I have to use pencil and then pen, because mistakes, I don't really like that, so yeah.
normally, you know, we come in, we can't bring our bags in the class for reasons, I guess. Hasn't told us. Last year we didn't have to.
I saw people with bags in the class as well.
Yeah. I might start bringing mine in because it's just, I have like so much stuff. At the moment, we're kind of learning perspective.
Yeah.
But it's a bit boring because if you've already if you were, say, a teenager, like a young child who was like, oh, I need to learn all about art, and you just watched a ton of YouTube videos, it's kind of like, yeah, I know.
So would you say it's
there's
kind of a beginner class a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't say if you know a tiny bit more than the basics, say you've mastered the basics and you've kind of dabbled a bit more, I don't think this would be a good class, I guess.
Yeah, so usually we're working on projects. So that class period was mostly just warm-ups and practices and just getting our brains flowing with story ideas and just quick practices. Usually, right now we're working on perspective, and that's really been a trial. And
case.
yeah, I mean, it's usually just filled by a lot of projects. We did signs or zines, however you want to say it. We did watercolors for a little bit. I think that was mostly the second year class people. And then we did a lot of work with magazines and pens and just cross-hatching and getting all those layers. So that's what it's been so far. It's only the first quarter. There's probably so many more projects to come.
I have a couple things that I'm just working on in general. I've been kind of exploring more fiber art lately. I won't get into that because then it'll get too sad. But so I'm currently kind of crocheting the canvas. I'm gonna try and stretch it using I'm thinking of maybe just finding twigs on the ground to kind of give it a fun vibe.
It's really cool.
And stretching it and just painting on that to kind of, kind of meld the two mediums of fiber art and paint, because I've kind of done that with one of my later projects of kind of blending them a bit, but it still hasn't fully meshed, and I feel it'd be interesting to try and do that.
My main one right now is a painting from my mother. It's 2 elephants. This is just on huge canvas, the biggest one I've ever worked on. I started with oil paints, realized, oil paints in a closed room with no air circulation, not a good idea. Don't do that. So I switched to acrylic, which is really hard when you have oil paints and then acrylic, because you have to really paint the acrylic on thick or else it'll beat up. But yeah, it's just huge black and white painting of 2 elephants, and their trunks are intertwined.
Painting on glass.
Yes.
I mean, I've heard of stained glass and stuff, and I'm not an artist personally, so I'm kind of coming into this with a very blind perspective on the wide amount of art that there is in the world. But can you explain a little bit about the painting on glass? It sounds super interesting.
Yeah. So usually I just buy those frames, just like a picture frame.
Yeah.
But then I take the glass out of the picture frame. Sometimes it's plexiglass, sometimes it's just plastic. It doesn't matter for me. And then I have my sketch underneath the glass, and I just start painting. It's really a trial and error process, and it really depends on the glass, but sometimes you can't go back, so you have to buy another glass pane, do the whole process over again. But the end product is so amazing. It's all worth it. I have a space in my room, just a little corner, where it's just, I have this huge glass pane that I'm working on, and there's acrylics, just different types of paints, and I found that acrylic works best. Anything water-based, like watercolor, it just beads up, and it doesn't really work. And acrylics, if you put a lot of water in it, doesn't work, and it kind of just like flakes off after it dries. It has to be thick, and I mean, it's really hard getting texture on the back of the glass, because it's, once you turn it around, it's just, you know, it's just, yeah.
Oh, so is that how you do it? You sort of paint on the back and then flip it around in the front is the final product?
Yes.
Oh, so you have to paint it like backwards then?
Yes, you do.
Oh, that's super interesting. Wow.
That's why you kind of have to sketch it out.
Yeah,
first.
sketch it out.
I'm not good enough to like.
Yeah, just sort of know how to paint it back.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Say, like, if I had to choose one medium, I'd probably go with acrylic paint.
Yeah.
I am not an oil paint person. The cleanup is horrendous because you can't put it down the sink. You got to do stuff. I'm also someone who does not particularly enjoy the wet on wet technique. I'm a wet on dry person, you know. I need my paint dry before I do the details.
Huh.
And
interesting.
yeah, I mean, that's the big difference. Oil paint takes forever to dry and acrylic dries fairly fast. I'd say oil paint, it's pretty smooth, you know, you get better blends, I'd say. But that's not something I personally like in my work. I kind of like the kind of where you can see the strokes, because I personally really like it when you can tell someone made it, you know. It's not just replicating a photo. Someone changed something in it. Someone did something to bring out qualities they wanted, you know.
I mean, do you have any thoughts, any rants you'd like to go on about AI?
I do indeed.
This is perfect.
Okay. Okay, so there's a painting by Keith Haring which is unfinished. The entire point of the piece was he was dying from AIDS at the time, so he wasn't able to finish the piece. That's the entire meaning behind the piece. It's unfinished for a purpose, and people have used AI to finish the piece, and it insults me so greatly. It pisses me off every single time I see it, because it's literally spitting in his face. It's literally stomping it on the ground, and it really angers me.
That I have not heard of. What do you know what the piece is called, so that I can look it up
Unfinished.
later? It's called Unfinished?
Yeah.
That is awful. What?
It's always really angered me, because I feel like
that I've never heard of that before today, but that is infuriating.
it's like, legitimately, I feel like it's like one of the most insulting things you could do, to have something which has such a profound and impactful meaning about how a lot of gay men were abandoned during the AIDS and kind of were left to die, and kind of making a piece about how he's not able to finish his work because he's been he has this illness, and to make a piece about that, which it's a really beautiful piece by itself, you know, and for people to finish it using his work, which has been stolen, to finish that work, basically robbing it of all soul and meaning and purpose behind it, is like, I mean, I know there's worse things to do to art, but I feel like that's one of them.
I think I agree with you there.
I feel like it's just purely spitting on it, and like,
yeah.
yes, I do.
Most proud and why, if you can.
So, I made this piece a year ago when I was visiting the School of the Art Institute, and they had an exhibit of Varro Remedis, who was a surrealist painter who just did gorgeous, amazing work. It was surrealism, and it was like such interesting visuals, but when you read the description of each piece, it gave such an insight to what it meant. It wasn't just a cool visual. Each had so much meaning.
So your piece was inspired by surrealism.
Yeah.
That trip. Mm-hmm. Do you like have a picture of it that we can show?
I do, yeah.
I kind of want to do some.
It's really just kind of dabbling in the idea of like this kind of weird creature which has elements that you recognize. You can point that out and go, oh yeah, that's like a weird bird. That's a weird peg leg. That's a Victorian ruff, but it's not recognizable. It's not real. Kind of standing in this apocalyptic scene, like something's happened to cause a chicken to appear this way.
Definitely that dragon one.
The dragon one?
It's really detailed. The reference picture that I was using, I like kind of stuck to it, but I also changed colors here and there. I like, you know, whatever. So I wish that I had like gone a little bit more away from the reference picture. That's the only like problem I had with it. But I absolutely love it.
It's kind of a way to express a lot of my thoughts, I feel like, because I'd say a fairly prevalent theme in a lot of my art is kind of queerness, especially recently. I've been trying to, in AP Art, one of my classmates was talking about how they do a lot of self-portraits to kind of make themselves feel more comfortable in their body and how they looked. And I found that was really interesting because that's kind of one of the reasons I don't really want to paint myself. And I don't like paint an exact portrait of myself, but I've been like getting better at kind of expressing my thoughts, I guess, and kind of putting a piece of me out there, you know?
Yeah.
Especially with my two recent art pieces have been kind of like an idea of if I had money and time to do drag, what would that look like? How would I look, you know?
It helps people feel a lot more confident in themselves and in their own bodies and in their own, you know, so having a more concrete sense of self and acceptance of that sense of self. I think that's a really beautiful thing.
You create something from nothing. You start with like, I've especially come to realize this with the project that I'm working on now. I have a zine that I'm working on. If you've ever watched, what was it? Game of Thrones, the prequel, House of the Dragon. I'm making a zine on the dragons from that, and it's kind of amazing because you start with this blank page, just nothing on it, and you just have to put something, and then you create with layers and layers and layers, and it's just like, boom, there's something there. Even if like you're terrible at art, you can still make something from nothing, and it's just amazing when you really think about it.
That's awesome. That's a really cool answer. So that was comic art and animation. Were the interviews primarily about the class? No, not at all. But were they interesting? I certainly thought so. These young artists had a lot to say about their craft, and I learned a lot from listening to them. Hearing passionate people speak about what they love is a great experience, and the class seems to be filled to the brim with passionate people. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to check out other student-made content across the New Trier News.